everyone. Close your eyes and imagine something for me. Imagine your eyes are open. What you just experienced is science fiction. Booyah! Today's book is many things. The basis for the movie Arrival, one of my all-time favorite sci-fi works, and a book that sounds like the author ran out of time to come up with a title. Okay, Ted, what's the name? Stories of Your Life and Others. It's by Ted Chiang and others.
But just Ted Chiang, right?
Yeah.
And this is The Book Pile.
I think it's so confusing because the main short story is called Story of Your Life, and it's like he made it plural twice. He changed it to Stories of Your Life and Others.
I'm Kellen Erskine. I'm a comic, a father, and someone who experiences time as a circle all at once, so I really connected with these stories.
And I'm David Vance. Fun tip, if you make a prediction about the future and it's wrong, just say, I wasn't wrong, I was early. And millions of Twitter idiots will wisely nod their heads with you. I love it when people do that because, one, now your predictions can just never be disproved. And two, early is still wrong. Like, if I say tomorrow will be the heat death of the universe, and the next day I'm like, I wasn't wrong, I was just early. You wouldn't be like, what a genius.
Right. For anyone who has ever trusted anyone else that has said that statement, just remember that every cult leader that has predicted the exact time and date of Doomsday has said the same thing 5 minutes later before he left the country with everyone's money.
I guess there is some selection bias because we only get to crack jokes at the expense of the doomsday prophesiers who were wrong. It's like how the suckiest thing about being an atheist is that if you're right, you can't gloat.
Yeah, that is probably the worst thing. So thanks to everyone who's come to see me recently at shows. I was recently in Austin, Texas, met a lot of fun people. I want to give a shout out to Melissa, Andrew, and Micah. And I think it was Micah who actually drove a good 5 hours from Oklahoma City to see me. I hope it was worth it. I know it was worth it, but I also really hope that it was.
10 hours total?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Although I maybe it wasn't, but I'm glad he didn't tell me. He was like, I drove 5 hours. I just moved here anyway. All right, if you're listening to this today or tonight, May 22nd, and you want to drive 5 hours from, I don't know, San Francisco or Vegas, you can see me in Hollywood at the world-famous Comedy Store. It's my first official appearance there. I'll be on with some other great comics as well. And then there's a quick rundown of other places. Listen for your state. June 15th. I'm in Mill Valley, California. Then July 7th through the 8th, I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota. Then July 9th, Mondovi, Wisconsin. Then July 21st to the 22nd, a relatively new date, West Jordan, Utah. August 12th, I'll be in Ramona, California. And then finally, of course, early Christmas present, December 9th through the 10th, I'll be in Des Moines, Iowa. Please buy all of your tickets immediately. Go to kellenerskine.com.
How many tickets have you sold to Des Moines? Because I think we should do a countdown of how many seats are left.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I just think it'd be really funny to just do a countdown for 7 months.
Just for 1 weekend of shows. Yeah. I'll grab some poster board, draw one of those permanent marker thermometers.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite sci-fi books, and I like it for similar reasons to why I like The Three-Body Problem, where he just takes fascinating science ideas and he makes them so emotional. Like, Kellen, what if an electron's dad died?
Oh.
Don't steal that. I'm making a pilot of that. What do you think?
By the way, for anyone who doesn't know, The Three-Body Problem is a novel. It's not an expose on the issues with thruples.
Although I bet some of the math is similar.
The unpredictable,
famously volatile, yeah. The collisions, the fact that one of them usually spins out of it entirely. I'm sure this has happened. It has got to suck to be the member that the other two break up with. Doesn't that seem like it'd be even more devastating?
Yes.
We've all had one person break up with us, hopefully. Imagine you're in a trio and the other two decide that they still love each other, just not you.
Oh, my word. So I love this book. Dave recommended it to me. Before I get into that real quick, if you're planning on reading this, we do have a few soft spoilers in this episode, but I don't think anything too revelatory. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I mentioned before that most short story collections for me are like music albums where usually a couple songs stand out and the rest, I guess, needed to be written so the band could find those two great songs. Like the band Alien Ant Farm, where they needed to record a whole album to discover that what they really needed for a hit song was just to cover a Michael Jackson song.
Oh, that is a great idea, is just use someone else's better idea.
Anyway, for me, this book was the inverse of these other short story collections that I mentioned earlier, because most of the stories I thought in this book were top notch. They have super interesting ideas, a writing style that's intelligent, but also evokes relatable, like grounded situations and feelings. Just two stories that I probably wouldn't care to revisit upon rereading it, which were 72 Letters and Division by Zero, which admittedly, I also don't think I fully grasped the ideas he was going for, so that might be on me. But in general, the genre of these stories to me are like if Ray Bradbury used actual science.
That's a great description.
One of the stories is basically, what if the Tower of Babel reached the top of the sky? What would it find? Which I could see Bradbury writing about. But then Chiang answers it with a beautiful sort of religious / physics answer.
Some of his are very hard sci-fi, and I notice when you read hard sci-fi, you realize how much other sci-fi is actually fantasy.
And that one's fun because it's almost like period piece sci-fi, which I don't know that I've really experienced before, where he takes a form of sci-fi and sets it back to the Babylonians.
I know. Yeah, when we say period piece, we actually just mean like Victorian or Georgian England.
The 1800s.
We don't mean like the Sumerians.
There were other periods.
Yeah. No one says, I'm writing a period piece about the Congo, 1540.
I've got this period piece I'm working on about when fish started growing legs.
I know evolution is slow, but wouldn't it be incredible if it was quick? This poor fish, I don't know, saw a hot man on the beach and...
I think mermaids would have actually become a real thing. It just needed to be a fish that was scared of coming all the way out of the water for millions of years.
All right, our next two books are Jonathan Livingston Seagull and All the Songs.
All right, and without further ado, here are 3 lessons that we took from Stories of Your Life and Others. All right, lesson 1. Come up with an irresistible what if. Like how the what if of Triscuits is, what if a basket was a cracker? I hate Triscuits. Or also how the premise of this podcast is, what if 2 guys listened to books and then made fun of them to make themselves feel better? Shoes are like, what if socks were hard? So these are all very compelling ideas, but the author has even more. And I'll dive deeper into each of these on my next point, but here's a quick list of a lot of the what ifs in this book. In the story, Liking What You See, he asks, what if everyone looked the same to you? What if there is zero biological response to someone being attractive or unattractive? And it's what I've heard is the opposite of being drunk, where some people just find everyone attractive. In the story, Hell is the Absence of God. The question is, what if it was common knowledge that God was real, but we still had no idea why he did what he did? Like his reasoning was still not known and thus still misinterpreted. In Story of Your Life, it's what could language look like from an alien being which had supposedly evolved 1,000,000 years farther, like close to perfection. And this isn't to be confused with the One Direction song of a similar title where the question is, what if I vaguely sung to whoever was listening as if I wanted to make babies and a life with them, but really I'm just making millions off of a song?
I think my favorite thing about a boy band is that somewhere a 50-year-old man says, "Girls of the world, you now like these boys." And the girls say, "Yes, we do."
And maybe my favorite story, aside from Story of Your Life, a story called Understand, he asks, what if you could undergo treatments that would make you exponentially smarter than any human in history? To which my answer is yes. And in the story 72 Letters, he asks, what if the gingerbread man was real? I'm actually not sure what that one is about still.
He asked, what if I wrote one more boring story just to remind you how good the other ones are? I'm actually sabotaging my belief for a bit because I did enjoy that one.
Anyway, I bet if you look back on your favorite stories, you'll find simple but compelling what ifs. Some of mine, and see if you can guess the title in your mind, Dave. Some of mine are, and these come from movies too. What if you went to space to escape the weight of the world and then were flung from an exploding space shuttle? What if the world is a simulation to keep us happy batteries for feeding robots? What if a guy lost his memory of being an assassin until he started going on shaky cam car chases in Europe? What if a man was made of iron? And finally, what if you could start a business busting ghosts?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what other great sci-fi can be described in a premise.
I guess Star Wars could have been, what if Dune was made into a movie in 1977?
Brave New World is like, what if you had all the physical pleasures you ever wanted and still found reasons to complain? All right, lesson 2. If you could turn off beauty, would you? So Kellen already mentioned this one. Listeners, if you haven't read the book, picture this. Someone comes to you in the future and says, look, we as humans discriminate against ugly people. Sorry, you're right. They don't like to be called that. People living with ugliness. Although it's probably hard to get a movement around it because no one wants to admit they're in the group. But in seriousness, we really do discriminate against unattractive people and we favor beautiful people. So they come to you and they say, well, we made a technology so you cannot tell who's beautiful and who's not. Would you use that technology? And Kellen, first, I want to know, would you use it?
I would only agree to it if everyone else was forced to do it too.
Oh.
Because I would,
Tell me more about that.
Well, I wouldn't want to know that 10% of people were still judging me. I think the harm of the pros doesn't hold a candle to the harm of the cons as far as discrimination goes with attractiveness, which is the world that we live in, right? I think this program, it would eliminate shallow relationships, bad hiring practices, me not wanting to look in the mirror back in 2020 when I gained 30 pounds, just a lot.
So you would do it, but if you knew other people were judging you, you would still want to be judging them?
Exactly.
Got it.
I think that's what it says in the Old Testament, but what would you do?
So I started out as a no, but I'll walk you through how I got to where I am right now. So at one point in the story, they say, for decades, people have been willing to talk about racism and sexism, but they're still reluctant to talk about lookism. This prejudice against unattractive people is incredibly pervasive. People do it without even being taught. But instead of combating this, modern society actively reinforces it. And that is for sure true. I tried to Google movies with ugly cast, and the third result was Coyote Ugly, which has 5 gorgeous women on the cover. The second result was animated.
Oh, of course. I think we also see this in movies like Cinderella stories, where they actually, the first half of the movie, it's not a movie about like an unattractive girl who becomes attractive. They just take an already hot actress
Yeah.
and try to make her look dumpy for the first part.
Yeah, watch She's All That and tell me that girl would be bullied in any school. Another example, How I Met Your Mother came up with the hot crazy scale, like, you must be this hot to be this crazy. And instead of saying, like, haha, it's messed up that we do that, everyone was like, yeah, let's start using that.
Right.
So the story says, think of caliagnosia, which is the technology. Think of it as a kind of assisted maturity. It lets you do what you know you should. Ignore the surface so you can look deeper. And here's where I was on the debate at this point. I was like, okay, I know I shouldn't discriminate based on looks. But also, finding someone attractive is, pretty fun. Would I want to not have that?
Sure.
Then the story talks about a school where everyone uses it. It says, Saybrook has a higher than normal number of students with facial abnormalities like bone cancer, burns, congenital conditions. Their parents moved here to keep them from being ostracized by other kids, and it works. And reading that was, very sweet and beautiful. And I get it because kids can be so dumb and mean. And then I thought this part was fascinating. Think of cocaine. In its natural form as coca leaves, it's appealing, but not to an extent that it usually becomes a problem. But refine it, purify it, and you get a compound that hits your pleasure receptors with an unnatural intensity. That's when it becomes addictive. Beauty has undergone a similar process thanks to advertisers. Evolution gave us a circuit that responds to good looks, and in our natural environment, it was useful to have. But take a person with a 1 in a million skin and bone structure, add professional makeup and retouching, and you're no longer looking at beauty in its natural form. You've got pharmaceutical-grade beauty, the cocaine of good looks.
Right.
That's why, first, we don't do video on the book pile. But here's my overall answer. First, if I could fiddle with the technology, I wouldn't turn off beauty. I would turn it up so everyone looks beautiful. That seems more fun.
There we go.
But second, if this existed, I would for sure at least try it. Because I think when there's a new technology that scares people, I always wonder, does it scare us because it's bad or scare us because it's new? Like people freaked out about IVF, and now I think most of us agree it's unambiguously good. Unless you're one of those people who think every human is a virus on the earth, in which case no one is forcing you to keep eating stuff. So I would for sure try it, and my hunch is once I had tried it, I would like it more than I think.
And I think, just to respond to something else that you said earlier, I agree too that being physically attracted, it is a fun part of attraction. But it would be interesting to see if this really was taken away and there was no biological response just to the physicality. We also know that so much of attractiveness is based on the deeper a relationship gets.
Disagree.
When you when you learn more about someone, And it works the opposite way too. I think all of us have dated someone who was attractive, but then the more that they became annoying, the less literally physically attractive they become. And it was my wife and I had a long distance relationship for our entire relationship until we got married, meaning that we saw each other once a month. I lived in California, she lived in Utah, and
you were keeping her away from that cocaine.
No, so obviously we were physically attracted at first, but it was neat to see that, especially at the time, there wasn't FaceTime or anything like that. It was just through email and phone calls that the attraction grew because of all the ideas that we shared. We found the things that were important to us and the things that we complimented each other on, and that part of it. You still get butterflies and everything, even when you can't see the person, and you just find that you can grow that part of the relationship. So that's all I'm saying is that I would be interested to see how much of it really is the initial attraction, I think, is just a face coming to a face. And then what if you just discussed ideas for the next 2 months on, either side of a curtain?
How did you meet?
My sister recommended, my sister gave me her number.
Oh, and so you just called her and began a purely phone courtship?
Yeah, that was it. In fact, I couldn't find her picture on the internet. Social media didn't really exist. Only MySpace did. And the only Abby Smith that I found was this woman wearing an Elvira costume. And I was like, is this what you wear every day? Turned out it wasn't her. But she was able to look me up, so maybe that's why she answered the phone. So I'll take that as a compliment. But yeah,
Wait, so how long did you talk before you saw her at all?
3 weeks.
Before you met? Wow.
Yeah. And then I was not disappointed. So here we are, 15 years later, getting divorced next week. No, it's still going great.
I'm laughing at your suffering.
No.
That's what comedy is. The suffering of others. I do want to say on that beauty story, I just listed all the arguments for using it because those were the things that moved the needle for me.
Mm-hmm.
He does a good job of he really attacks it from every angle, and it's just such an interesting story.
Yeah. Lesson 3, explore your what if relentlessly. Like for the question, what if a man was made of iron? You could explore it. Like, if he goes swimming, will he rust to death? Is his real superpower putting his fingers in the mouths of anemic people? Does he even have to participate in an Ironman triathlon to get a medal? So you could really dive deep. Anyway, this is adding on to my previous point. It astounds me not just how interesting so many of Chiang's core ideas are that drive these stories, but then also how thoroughly he dives into them.
Yeah.
In the story, Understand, he asks, what if you could undergo treatments that made you exponentially more intelligent than anyone else? And he goes into how, like, in this example, it's the government that is administering these. And as this guy becomes smarter, he realizes that he needs to start doing poorly on these tests so that the CIA wouldn't recruit him, which is the last thing he wanted to do. He's also a very self-centered character that becomes highly intelligent. He gets to the point where he's inventing things in his mind, but doesn't even bother to physically create them because he already knows that they'll work. He discovers that there's another highly intelligent person out there. He goes to fight this other highly intelligent person, but what does that look like when both of you are not only incredibly smart, but have learned to control your organs at will and even discovered hypnosis techniques? The myriad directions that he goes into just makes an already interesting question that much more fascinating, as it seems like he's brainstorming every angle that would be possible in this world. It's interesting to me too, though, because it's written so well and so intelligently. Like the movie Limitless has a similar but less explored premise, but this story, Understand, was published over a decade earlier. So who really is the smarter one? No, but the movie Limitless, it's like interesting. It's a Bradley Cooper film where he just takes a pill to get smarter. But it's sort of a paradox because to become a person that is smarter than anyone who has ever existed, the author has to be that person.
Yeah.
And in Limitless, I just was never really on board.
You never bought it.
Yeah, but in this story, Understand, it makes sense to me the direction that he goes in. That we know that intelligence is not just how well you can memorize everything, but it seems like he takes what intellectuals, quote unquote, from history have all been striving for, which is to find patterns in everything that exists, right? This theory of everything. To me, it gave more credibility to what exactly is intelligence, and then what is a higher version of that.
That reminds me of a great Einstein quote where he says, "It can scarcely be denied that the supreme goal of all theory is to make the irreducible basic elements as simple and as few as possible without having to surrender the adequate representation of a single datum of experience." Like, how do you find the simplest way to explain everything?
Right. My question is, and I'm sure I just need to do more reading on this, I wonder if our biological response, or at least for intellectuals, for people who are looking for more and more, we know that our brains, like 80% of the stuff that we do every day is subconscious thought. That's why you can't remember, which shoe you put on first or which hard sock, whatever it was. That joke's not going to make sense if you didn't hear the beginning of the episode, but it's because your brain is constantly trying to find things that it can sort of black out, like things that it can simplify so that it can run more efficiently. And if we discover a solution for something, we can stop thinking about it because now there is a solution to it. And so our poor brains, I wonder if the biological response to get smarter is just our brain's attempt to be able to settle down, and then we just never let it. So I guess dumb people are just being
Zen.
Nice to their brains.
No, speaking of not remembering the dumb things your brain does, I lose my phone all the time because I have this habit of putting it somewhere I won't look at it while I'm working. But I've gotten the habit so much that I'll do it and not realize I did it. I'll just be like, where's my phone? And it turns out I hid it 3 hours ago without even being conscious I was hiding it. It's like I have another self. I do sometimes think about that. With how little we're aware of what our subconscious does, what if the subconscious is another conscious mind and they just can't speak to each other?
Oh, interesting.
What if the subconscious thinks we're the subconscious?
Dave, people came to this podcast to laugh, not to have their minds blown.
I'm sure there's a scientific way to answer that question, and I'm sure it's already been answered. But I'm going to pose it like I'm the very first person. Books love doing this.
And just as a final example, not from the book, but from Inception. I think that Christopher Nolan does this with all of his movies, but Inception sticks out to me because the whole movie starts by exploring its own idea immediately. The premise is, what if you could go inside other people's dreams? And you think that the movie begins in a dream, but within the first few minutes, we discover that we are already in a dream within a dream. Mm-hmm. So he is already layering his already interesting question.
I want to add that part of the reason these questions hit isn't because they're about things, it's because they're about people. Like, it's not just, what if there were a super intelligence? It's, how would it be emotionally to become a super intelligence? And from this character's perspective, it's all about his perception of beauty and seeing these enormous patterns and gestalts. And he talks about how all these individual intellectuals are trying to tease out one note and he can see the entire sonata, that sort of thing. If it had just been about, then I understood this and I understood that, it wouldn't be nearly as exciting as, here's the emotional rush of becoming a super genius.
Yeah.
All right, random facts.
So The Guardian ranked Stories of Your Life and Others number 80 on its list of the 100 best books of the 21st century. And just for a barometer of that chart, judge it how you will because everyone has an opinion. Number 17 is The Road.
Great one.
42 is Moneyball. 64 is On Writing. That's nice. So there are two that we've done. Number 75 I've never heard of, but it sure sounds fun. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead.
That sounds like a book for very specific hobbyists.
And here's the one that sort of made the list lose a bit of its credibility. Way back at 97 is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. By the way, the only Harry Potter book on this whole list. But at least it's in the same list as, Cormac McCarthy.
I will say I love that Guardian list. The first time I found it, I saw that there were already a ton of books I loved on it. And I found a lot of really great books from that list specifically, including this one.
The funny thing about lists in general, isn't it? It's like, as long as there are lots of things on the list that you have read or experienced, you're like, this list is right.
Oh, no. It seriously is great for that reason, because you can get on and know, oh, they have similar taste to what I like. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. In the Story of Your Life, the main character is a linguist hired to learn and translate a spoken alien language, and she proposes that they start requesting from the aliens written symbols of their words rather than just trying to decipher and match the sounds alone, because of how unreliable our brains actually are at interpreting sounds. And I think this is especially evident in just how we listen to songs. There are so many. The one that I'm going to list that up until maybe 2 years ago, the song How's It Gonna Be by Third Eye Blind, there's a part at the end where he's just sort of screaming, the soft dive of oblivion, and he's just screaming oblivion. But like, until I read the lyrics a couple of years ago, I thought he was screaming clears the air. That's 2 R's.
Instead of oblivion?
Oblivion. That's not even like a bad poem.
Wait.
They just straight up don't rhyme.
I need to listen to the song. What's it called? I want to hear if I hear it.
So it's How's It Gonna Be? And it's about the 240 mark.
Oh, yeah, for sure here to clear the air. They're saying oblivion?
Yeah.
They're really not smacking those consonants, are they?
No.
Sometimes the way Tom York pronounces a word in a Radiohead song, I'm like, you're doing it on purpose. Yeah. You must just like the sound when you say the word wrong, because there's no way you think you're saying that word correctly.
Blink-182 does the same thing so much. I don't know where that weird punk accent came from or if he invented it. But in that one song about, where are you? And I'm so sorry. I cannot sleep. I cannot dream tonight. My
Yeah.
Like, who pronounces it tonight ever?
Yeah, where does the emo accent come from? I grew up in North Emo, past the tracks.
But Dave, is there a song or two like that you misunderstood for most of your life?
My favorite story of this is I was in a band in college, and one day I hear the drummer singing one of our songs, and I was like, is that what you think our lyrics are? My personal one is It's Gonna Be Me by NSYNC. I remember 4th grade, the 5th graders were doing a lip sync talent show, and 3 guys did that song, and at one point 2 of them did front handsprings, and I thought, now that's cool. And actually, years later, one of those guys, Max, became one of my very best friends. So it was a fun how they met story. Anyway, as a kid, I remember thinking all the time, like, song lyrics don't make a lot of sense, do they? Only to find out later, like, no, you just misunderstood like every song. So last year, It's Gonna Be Me came on, and I started singing it, and Ami was like, what words are you saying? I was singing things like, every little thing I do, never see me look for you. And like, baby, when you find the beat. Somehow my sister Jess has this superpower where anytime a lyric is hard to understand, she just knows what they're saying. I haven't seen her get a lyric wrong.
Yeah, that is like a superpower. And even in that song, I mean, I don't blame you too much because when they pronounce the word me, like, May.
Yeah. It's gonna be May.
It's not even close. It's the month we're in right now.
Yeah.
And for everyone listening, if you want to check out the audio version of this podcast on YouTube, you can leave in the comments what's a song or two that you misunderstood for most of your life and what were the lyrics. I love this section at the end of the book. I wish that more authors would do this, where he essentially does commentary on every single one of his stories. It describes how the seed of the idea came about and how he developed the story, and I just love hearing about the creative process. And during that part, he talks about this equation, e to the power of I times pi plus 1 equals 0. And he says, something we admire most in fiction is an ending that is surprising yet inevitable. And this is also what characterizes elegance in design, the invention that seems clever yet totally natural, inevitable. And I think the same could be said about the end of every one of our podcast episodes. Especially since he ends the paragraph with, quote, it's a feeling of awe like you've encountered absolute truth. Just like you're looking at this beautiful equation. It all adds up to 0. And another thing that I found fascinating was this interview with John Williams where he talks about this similar principle when he's discussing the theme to Indiana Jones, just that simple da-da-da-da, da-da-da. He says, it's a simple little sequence of notes, but I spend more time on those bits of musical grammar to get them just right so that they seem inevitable, so that it seems like they've always been there. They're so simple. And I don't know how many permutations I will go through with a 6-note motif like that. 1 note down, 1 note up. I spend a lot of time on these little simplicities, which are often the hardest things to capture.
Interesting.
What's that quote that you brought up before when I was discussing this idea of, like, I feel like there's 3 levels of artistry. The first is mimicry when you're starting out. The second is trying to be too elegant. Like Alan Dean Foster novelizing Transformers, and it becomes distracting.
Hey, you keep his name out your mouth.
And then the third one is being so good at your craft that you know how to do the simple things best, like Paul McCartney writing Yesterday, a simple song that could not have been written by a simple musician.
It's from James Clear. He says, beginner equals ignorant simplicity. Intermediate equals functional complexity. Advanced equals profound simplicity.
And I love that with his skill set, he communicated in about 11 words, what just took me 2 minutes. But
Yeah, you're in the functional complexity.
you get what me and Dr. Clear are both saying.
Can we just call people doctors now? That's great.
That's just what I automatically call anyone who is smarter than me, I assume. They must have a 12-year degree. So the director of the most recent Dune movie, Denis Villeneuve, which I don't know how to pronounce his last name, though for sure many of our faithful fans are correcting me right now, especially our French-Canadian ones. But I do know that I'm at least saying his first name right because it's Denis with just one N, so it's faster.
I loved his early work in Denis the Menis.
I actually really do enjoy what he brought to the story with his movie adaptation of Story of Your Life, which, as you mentioned, he directed the movie of it renamed Arrival with no N's. And rather than committing to the common mistake of changing major portions of an adapted story for a movie, I think he just brought more visual grandeur to it, which made it more ominous and beautiful. So, like, instead of just the humans communicating with the aliens on essentially a flat screen TV inside a tent the whole time, as it is in the book, Villeneuve brings in these otherworldly, massive round spaceships which just sort of hover quietly over random parts of the world.
Yeah.
Highly recommend the movie, which was beautifully adapted from this story, which essentially travels in a circle as you are watching it. It's really incredible.
Oh, I need to rewatch it.
The reason why this story to me stuck out the most is the incredible way in which he describes that seeing time as this circle from beginning, middle, end could actually work. One of the storylines in this is this woman who, as she learns this sort of circular language, her brain becomes rewired to be able to understand and see time from end to beginning. And so the question essentially becomes, and is answered by her, like, if you knew that you were going to lose one of your children eventually, would you still make the decisions to have them in the first place just to experience them in your life? And so it's very heavy, but it's also beautiful and just such a powerful visitation of the idea of love and how it sort of transcends time.
Yeah. All right, this book could also be called
72 Letters and More. This book could also be called Stories of Your Life if you are interested in physics, linguistics, religion, and social commentary.
This book could also be called That Movie Where Amy Adams Plays a Troubled Character. All right, to recap our favorite lessons from Stories of Your Life and Others. 1, come up with an irresistible what if. 2, if you could turn off beauty, would you? 3, explore your what if relentlessly.
And 4, don't waste your time on me, you're already the voice inside my head.